Just last week, at the conclusion of our previous Shabbat, cantorial soloist Steinberg and I were joined by many folks at Temple Israel's Crosstown space in Midtown. And the verse that began our Havdalah came from Psalm 118, where we read, Min hametzar karati ya, anani v'merchav ya. Out of distress I called out to God. God answered me and brought me relief. It continues, Adonai li lo ira, ma yaseh li adam. God is by my side, I have no fear. What can a person do to me? This couplet of verses is contained within a psalm of gratitude and triumph. A psalm Jews have sung for generations as part of Hallel, an acknowledgement of God's goodness and protection over the centuries. That one particular phrase, what can a person do to me, feels to me a clear statement of bravado, of confidence, something that one could easily find in pop music anthems or perhaps even in a Super Bowl halftime show. And yet the opening of these verses point to a very different emotional state, literally a narrow place, a place of distress, of difficulty, of fear, of pain, a stark contrast with the open bravado of the next verse. The distress described in this ancient poem is likely not dissimilar to the distress we might feel in our own lives. Distress that is so often caused by others. So in response to the question, what can a person do to me? I find myself looking out at our world, our people, our community, our nation, and responding, saying, actually, quite a lot. And what these verses point to is how so often in Jewish tradition, as it is in our lives, there is a powerful tension between opposites that often we experience both at the same time. Fear and confidence, joy and sadness, darkness and light. Even in our triumphs, we remember the narrow place from which we were redeemed. And even in the darkest of times, we know there is always a spark of light to be found. Our upcoming holiday of Purim is a perfect example of this tension and how it shapes our collective Jewish memory. Even as Purim is a day of joy, whimsy, silliness, and indulgence, the themes highlighted by the Purim story are indeed very serious and very relevant to so many painful periods of Jewish history. Many may not know that the day before all of this responsible drinking and feasting that we have on Purim is Ta'anit Esther, a day of fasting, a way of acknowledging the dangers posed to our people, both past and present, even as we celebrate our redemption from them. Lest we forget these dangers, the Shabbat just before Purim, Shabbat Zachor, or the Shabbat of Remembrance, serves to us naturally as a reminder. On this Shabbat, we take a break from our journey through the book of Exodus and turn instead to Deuteronomy, and specifically Parshat Tetzaveh, where we read, remember, Zachor, what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, Amalek surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, in the land that your God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Lo tishkach, do not forget. Few questions. Who is Amalek, first and foremost? And why is it so important that we remember them? Or specifically, that we remember to make sure that no one else remembers them? The simple answer is Amalek, or as many refer to them, the Amalekites, were one of the ancient peoples with which the Israelites had conflict in their wanderings in the wilderness. Yet unlike other nations, Amalek seems to have violated some sort of norm or rule of engagement in their attack. Most commentators point to that passage, when you were famished and weary, and Amalek cut down all the stragglers in your rear. The commentators teach that it wasn't out of any strategic gain that Amalek attacked, but it was only because the Israelites were weak, having just escaped Egypt. And yet, over time, Amalek, or the Amalekite, transforms from a specific nation or a specific ethnicity, some may even call it, to a larger category, representing really pure evil. Of course, the relation to our upcoming holiday of Purim is that Haman, thank you, is seen as a descendant of Amalek. And of course, similar figures throughout history are seen as descendants, perhaps not genealogically, but ideologically, of this ancient nation. And it becomes a label used for a wide number of groups. Just to name a few, some ancient and medieval Jewish sources view Christians, or Edom, which meant Rome, as Amalekites. Conversely, Christian leaders have also used the term, including Martin Luther, who claimed that the Jews who fought against Jesus were indeed Amalek. And it has even been used by Jewish intellectual leaders to describe other Jews, including Rabbi Israel Meir HaKohen, the Chafetz Chaim, who said that the Jewish communists in Russia were from the seed of Amalek, and indeed some Jews in Israel today that have said all of the leftists, quote unquote, from Meretz are descendants of Amalek. Most recently, we actually see this terminology of Amalek being used by Israeli politician Bezalel Smotrich, who has cited these Torah verses that we read on Shabbat Zachor in calling for the complete destruction of Rafah, Deir al-Alba, and Nuseirat in Gaza. And so we see that Amalek shifts and morphs, that no one has a monopoly on this term, but it is a term that can be applied to so many different people, so many different groups, so many different ideologies. So Shabbat Zachor is indeed this reminder, a reminder of the darkness that can take root in our world, and a darkness that can even take root in ourselves. It is a reminder that we are not immune. In being reminded each year, we are encouraged to confront this darkness, to see the dangers of Amalek in our own times. Now, these days, we may not need to look far, and we may not need as many reminders as our ancestors once did, but our tradition insists to remember, to not forget, or to ensure that others don't forget as well. And we see in our tradition that memory and forgetting are intertwined. Our efforts to blot out the memory of Amalek are remembered each and every year. And here again we find this tension between opposites: fear and pride, joy and sadness, remembering and forgetting, hope and despair. And so in remembering Amalek's inhumane actions, we are reminded of what we aspire to be, those better angels of our nature, those higher standards and higher values we are called to. Considering this tension, the great early Zionist thinker Burl Katznelson once wrote, "Human beings are endowed with two faculties, memory and forgetfulness. We cannot live without both. Were only memory to exist, then we would be crushed under its burden. We would become slaves to our memories, to our ancestors. And were we ruled entirely by forgetfulness? What place would there be for culture and science? A renewing and creative generation does not throw the cultural heritage of ages into the dustbin. It examines and scrutinizes, it accepts and rejects. At times it may keep and add to an existing tradition. At times it descends into ruined grottos to excavate and remove the dust from that which had lain in forgetfulness in order to resuscitate old traditions which have the power to stimulate the spirit of the generation of renewal. On this Shabbat of memory, I pray that we consider the value of our memory, specifically our collective Jewish memory. Is it to serve merely as a reminder of the Meitzar, the moments of distress, of victimhood, of tragedy? Or does it also serve as a reminder of strength, of resilience, of the light that serves as our response to the Meitzar, the bravado that informs the question, what can a person do to me? Both of these can be true, just as the twin masks of tragedy and comedy coexist in our holiday of Purim. Our memory indeed serves many purposes. It comes to tell us that we are not alone, that we have been here before, and we have been confronted by these evils before. It comes to tell us what it is that we fight against, those who fight against dignity, decency, and the celebration of the diversity of our world. And it also comes to show us that we are not immune to this darkness either. Does our remembrance of Amalek simply serve as a reminder of all that is dark and evil in the world, or does it also remind us of how our people have responded and continue to respond to that evil by covering its name with sound and song and joy, by aspiring to higher values, even as the darkness of despair and hopelessness threatens to envelop us? May we find the light. May we be the light. May we see the light, even as we face the darkness. And let us say together, Amen.
Amen.